Thank you for joining our life-saving lab um, on managed intake. My name is Brent Holner. I'm the Senior Director of Life-Saving Programs at Best Friends. Um, and then I'm going to be joined by four panelists here. I'm going to be joined by Misty Valenta, who is with Williamson County uh, Regional Animal Shelter in Williamson County, Texas. Anastasia Ramsey, who is with the City of Fort Worth Animal Shelter. Nick Laprisi, who is with Finger Lakes SPCA of Central New York, and then Rachel Ide from Young Williams Animal Shelter in Knoxville, Tennessee. We're going to be talking about managed intake. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart because I feel like it's kind of gotten a bad rap unnecessarily in animal welfare circles at times because of people who are doing it not so well. And so I've assembled a panel here of folks who I think are doing an extremely good job of their managed intake programming, of providing the services to the community. And so I'm going to turn it over to them to let them talk about their services and programs. So I'm going to have all of them go through. Well, I may ask a few questions. We do have a question and answer box down at the bottom of the bar. So if you have questions for any of the panelists, we'll either try to get to them live or we will send you a note in and respond in the Q&A tab when they're done speaking. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. Oh, and I should also mention, this is part one of this series. So we're going to talk with the four panelists this week, kind of more on the philosophy of managed intake and how folks are thinking about it in their community. And then next week, we're going to do a deeper dive into managed intake programs so that you can get an idea of how you can start one in your community for it. So with that, I'm going to start with our panel. And Nick, you're going to be up first. Um, we've had our conversation a couple of weeks ago just to kind of prepare for this. And I was really struck by your philosophy around managed intake and how you began implementing it. So take us away and get us started on how you think about it in New York.
Well, thank you, Brent. So managed intake for our shelter is I took over as director a couple of years ago. And at that time we had a open intake, policy. And then we would run into this problem of we are always full. And then we were turning people away or not able to take in those animals. So I started really, looking at what we were doing and being a small shelter. We some other shelters too, such as veterinarians. So it's really looking at that process. And what I come to find out was we were never asking any questions. It was always, yep, we'll take the animal, no questions asked, no problem. And I really went, our whole philosophy in animal welfare, I think, across our nation and all of our mission statements is we want to better the lives of the animals in our communities and our community members. And I went, we're missing an opportunity here with community members that are looking to surrender those animals. We spend so much time on the adoptions front of what do these animals need to succeed, and doing that humane education work with every other aspect of what we do in the industry. And I'm like, why don't we apply any of that to our intake policies? Why are we not educating those finders of those stray animals, those owners of, what do they need from us? And this is a great opportunity for us as an animal welfare industry to come together and go, boy, this is a great education moment. So that's where we started what I call our care program. And we start all of our intakes with a consultation, not so much at just all right, it's a scheduled managed admissions. We're going to have you scheduled at a certain point, but let's deep dive and do a one-on-one consult with each individual person on what are those challenges? Why are we looking to surrender that pet? And see if we can find an alternative solution, but also work through with that person and do that education piece so they understand where the shelter's coming from and they feel better themselves. So that's kind of just my philosophy is let's take that opportunity here to educate that person that's coming to us for this service. This approach for us being a smaller shelter, it gives us time as management, Brent, to really look at, okay, my shelter, we don't have a veterinarian on staff. If somebody's calling me and going, hey, I have a sick dog or something's going on, being able to go in non emergency situations, being able to go, okay, let me call you back in 20 minutes and get on the phone with a local veterinary practice. Starting to preemptively take that proactive approach rather than now that animal's at my doorsteps or I took it and I can't get into the vet office or I can't have a vet on site for within a few hours, really meant all the difference. We did the same thing with any kind of behavioral, medical, any challenges that we might be facing. We even, because of this, we found out, hey, one of the big reasons we're getting intakes in our community is evictions. So I actually went to our sheriff's department, their eviction department, and now when they go give notices 60 days prior, we have our flyer of call the shelter, let us help you prepare for the inevitable if you have animals and how we can help you through it. So we've just been able to really going to this managed admission, being proactive in every kind of step of why someone might need to surrender an animal. And the amazing thing that I did not really expect with this approach is how much our community responded to this. Um, so by asking everybody to do a consultation with our program, we also give them resources and guided expertise from our adoption staff on how to help rehome that animal. And people that are participating in our program um, have a 90% success rate in finding that animal a new home with our guidance before they even have to come into the shelter, which is just outstanding. When we look at number wise, it's really quadrupled our impact on these animals that we had. And it's just, I can't believe it. But number one important statistic for me, and I think something all of us in the sheltering world that we have to look at is our length of stay. And before we started this program, our average length of stay for animals that were coming into the shelter before they hit the adoption floor was 3 weeks without that medical staff. Right now, it is 4 days. And that's all because every twice a week we have meetings to discuss, okay, what's potentially coming in? What are those proactive approaches that we can do? Is it, all right, this animal's coming directly in and we need to find a foster parent, and right after we do that initial health exam, within an hour, it's going to foster? Is it, we need to bring in that animal and somebody's already lined up right to bring it to the vet? It's amazing when we take this proactive approach, how quickly that length of stay can drop, how much it means to our animals, and really how much more we can help the community. So I'm a big believer in a managed admissions because it puts the shelter in a proactive approach, which means you're going to be able to do more.
Yeah, I think is what's really like a cool part of our conversation was you talking about the length of stay, like when you don't have the vet staff there, and you have to wait for the rabies certificate, and you have to wait for the spay neuter, and like all of those things in there, that it's just able for you to streamline that process so that those dogs and cats are there less time, is less stress on the animals, but it's also less stress on your shelter staff. So I thought it was a really cool component of our conversation. I want to talk to you about like the overall success rate, because I think your ability to proactively reach animals out in the community, you said you were helping a lot more animals than you actually were when you're bringing them all into the shelter. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and I think the first couple months that we started our program, it was a little stressful for the staff because we still had the shelter numbers, we still had the animals in the shelter. Um, But after the first few months, what we found was the animals in the shelter, the number of animals we served for the entire year stayed the same, but the number of animals we had at one given time in the shelter was halved. And that then meant my staff, which is very small, again, I have like 5 staff, They then took the approach of anybody that was calling to looking to surrender. We started that consultation of what can we do? How do we go through this process of trying to help you rehome? Is this animal an emergency and he has to come in? So we started this, what we call the care program. 2 days after that initial call, Brent, the staff followed up. We followed up via email. We now do text messaging and we do phone calls. How are things going? What more can we do to assist you? Are you having trouble? And then a week later, and then 2 weeks later. So we made sure that we were constantly engaging with that community member. And at no time did they ever feel like they were on their own. And we helped them every step of the way. And it was whether that be somebody saying, hey, I'm not sure about this particular home for this dog. Well, why is that? And we just really started applying our adoption work to our intake work. And it was really cool to see the adoption staff now working with a community member that's looking to rehome an animal, and just our shelter manager or myself going through with somebody about this sickly, elderly geriatric cat of, hey, what's going to be best for that animal? And yes, we will take that animal in, but hey, I don't have a vet coming in till Saturday. Can we bring the kitty in, Saturday morning so I can ensure the vet gets to see that animal within 2 hours of it coming? And our community was very responsive because they want what's in the best interest of that animal. And when we're able to communicate to them of what we're able to provide, they're willing to always meet us halfway. And it was just absolutely outstanding.
Yeah, I love it. And it really is put your staff in a situation because you do have a small staff, but instead of them spending all of their time on animal care, they're able to use their expertise in the community to actually help the community um, be better stewards for the animals and create better outcomes for them. So I really dig that. Nick, thank you so much. Folks, Nick will be on the call next week to talk even more about his program. So you'll for sure want to dive into all of that. And if you have any questions for Nick in the short term, you can jump in on the Q&A and ask over there, and Nick will be able to follow up with you. Um, Meanwhile, I'm going to turn it over to Anna. Anna, in Fort Worth, Texas, you're on the other side of the spectrum. You have a huge intake at Fort Worth, and you started implementing managed intake kind of because you've had a feeling of necessity for it. So tell us a little bit about your program in Fort Worth and how it's working for y'all.
Hi. Yeah, so like Nick, when I started here at Fourth Animal Care and Control, we had a completely open intake policy. And for us, that includes intaking about 20,000 animals a year, which averages out to a little more than 50 animals a day. So for us, kind of implementing these strategies was really, really important to allow us to balance the flow of animals. And realistically, we couldn't keep up with the number that were coming in a way that was fair to the pets or to the community. So managed intake has allowed us to slow things down and look at each case individually, and make sure that animals that truly need to be in the shelter are prioritized. Instead of being just a drop-off point for pets, we've shifted to becoming more of a resource center, helping families keep their pets when possible, and offering as many alternatives to surrender as possible. The goal has always been to reduce unnecessary shelter intake while improving outcomes for the animals who do need to come in. So we've been fortunate to partner with a local nonprofit, Spay Neuter Network, to make this program work. The way it works is they contact them through their pet resource center that is on our website. And then they're able to start the process. It's completely free to them. There's nothing that they have to buy into or anything like that. And it is just them connecting people with additional resources that they may not know about. Some of the things that we offer are free behavior support, free medical with the resources that we have and Spay Neuter Network has. We offer free food at our shelter 7 days a week. And we've even partnered with our foster program and rescue partners for families that are experiencing truly a temporary hardship. that's likely to resolve in a matter of days or weeks. You know, their dad has fallen and they have to fly across the country and they don't have anyone to keep the pet and they can't afford to board it. Let us put it into our foster program for you, pick it back up, because the reality is we don't want to have to rehome your pet. We want you to get your pet back. We don't want to damage that bond between you and your pet. And we understand that emergencies happen. And so we want to be able to keep the pets together when possible. Partnerships like that have allowed us to expand our capacity to help our community, and to keep more pets at home with their families, which is really the goal. So instead of us saying yes, or no, we work with the families to explore those options and to come up with something that works for everyone. Animals that are experiencing any type of medical necessity or medical emergency are always accepted. They can walk in, they don't even have to go through the resource center. Or if they're experiencing a behavior issue that is a risk to them, another pet, the family, those are also always accepted. Again, no appointment is necessary. They're able to walk in. And then if someone's found a pet, we never want to tell someone, hey, we're full, we're not going to take this found pet, and risk not reuniting that pet. We know that even though we have a website that is updated with photos and even has a map, we know that more people find their pets by coming into our building and walking it. And there are still people who don't understand technology the same way that we do. So they may not understand to go to the website. They may not understand how that all works and how to get their pet back. So we always are open to take animals in that are lost, that have, you know, someone has found on the street, or anything like that.
That's awesome. You know, and I think your approach to being sure that those animals that need a place to go and they need to come into the shelter urgently, there's a spot for them, but is like really working with those places, with those individuals who the pet doesn't need to come in, or like would actually love to keep their animals at home if that was a possibility. So how did you go about communicating these changes? That's a big change in a huge community like Fort Worth. I mean, you have over 1 million people in the community. Um, how were you able to communicate this? What was the public's reception to it?
Sure. So anytime you change something as significant as intake at an open admission shelter, communication does have to be front and center. We knew that moving away from an open, immediate intake could cause some frustration. But at the same time, people were already frustrated with our process. They would wait in line hours to surrender their pet. By the time they got to the front door and we offered them some type of counseling to keep their pet, they had already been there for 2, 3 hours, sometimes in the middle of the day in Texas heat in July. Nobody is receptive at that point to any type of counseling. And so they were already frustrated with the process. So we really took the time to help people understand how this was better, not just for the pets that may or may not need to enter our care, but how it's better for the community and how it has a ripple effect and can impact more than just an individual pet, how it can impact whole families. We knew that if we didn't communicate it correctly, it could look like we were turning animals away or not doing our job. And we wanted to be very intentional in explaining that managing intake is not about saying no. It's about saying yes, but let's find the right solution. Let's make sure that coming into the shelter is absolutely the right solution for you, your family, this pet. We shared that bringing an animal into the shelter immediately, regardless of the circumstances, was leading to overcrowding, higher stress, illness, and ultimately more euthanasia. And our community does have a goal that we want to reduce unnecessary euthanasia in our buildings, and really communicating out how this works. We did a lot of messaging throughout several formats. We did all of our social media channels for several weeks prior to initiating this. We did press releases. We equipped our frontline staff with talking points for people as they were coming in inquiring about it, letting them know, hey, just so you know, this is a new program we'll be rolling out. This will be the process, getting them used to it when they were inquiring. And then we started highlighting the resources that were going to be available with us managing intake and how that would positively impact everybody. Um, we really wanted to frame this as a community support system rather than a barrier, right? We didn't want it to be a barrier to us helping pets. We wanted to support our community to help empower them to care for their pets and keep their families intact. At first, the response was, a little mixed, like we expected. Some people were frustrated, especially those who were used to being able to drop a pet off same day. Those were the people who would get here at 9 a.m., even though we don't open until 11 for intake, and wait outside to leave a pet. They were frustrated when they found out that they now had to go through a whole process. But once we consistently communicated that it was about giving the animals the best chance at placement and support to keep families together, the tone kind of shifted. It allowed us to have more conversations with the community about behavior challenges. Pets are given proper decompression time, a heavier focus on how spay and neuter is so important, and also just helped us connect with so many resources in our community that people just didn't know exist. Spay Neuter Network operates a pet resource center that it's kind of like a call center and a website put together. But they have people who actually speak with them as well when they make the appointment. So they'll do it online. And if they're not able to do it online, then we help walk them through it. And then a person calls them and does an intake counseling essentially. Looks at, okay, what kind of dog are you surrendering? Do we have a rescue group who's looking for this dog to avoid it going to the shelter? Does your dog have maybe flea dermatitis? Yeah. Okay. Is that why you're surrendering? Yeah. I can't afford the medical for it. Okay, great. So we have programs available to help with that. And they're available even without contacting the center, but people didn't know that. And again, that falls back on marketing. We have a heavier focus now on marketing the resources available to people so they don't think that they have to surrender the pet to solve the pet's problem or their family's problem. And we've seen the community over the last year become more understanding and supportive. And many don't just view us as an animal shelter anymore, but as a partner in problem solving.
Yeah, I love that. Because I think your point is so well taken about like the large shelters when there becomes that line of 2 hours of people waiting in line to get in. Like at that point that like people just want to get rid of the pet and get out of there. And so being able to have that conversation in a more relaxed setting, in a way that can be more
Yes.
of a problem solving setting, I think is crucial. And I also just love the fact that you're partnering the with Spay Neuter Network, who has additional resources above and
Mhm.
beyond. So it's not just all on you all to be able to solve all of that. Um, and my understanding is that it's working pretty well. Like it's helping
Yeah.
keep animals out of the shelter. Do you have any data behind that that you can share for us with us?
Yeah, so our intake has reduced our owner surrenders by about 1,300. We have not seen an increase in strays that correlate to that. So our owner surrenders have decreased from year over year. We've only had managed intake in this capacity implemented about 18 months, but we have seen a reduction in our intake and we've seen an increase in our positive placement. One, we have more information about the pets that are coming in as owner surrenders. And two, we're able to just focus more of our resources on these pets that truly need us. And 1,300 is a very large number, even for us, where we take in 20,000 animals a year. It is still a huge number for us for reduction, especially when those aren't pets who needed to come in anyway. Clearly, those pets had owners who were looking to keep them and just needed the support to do so, even if it was that short term foster that, hey, I have this emergency, I'm getting kicked out of my house, and I'm not going to have the money for a pet deposit until 2 pay periods from now. I don't want to get rid of my pet, but I have to have a place to live with my kids. We're able to step in and kind of help with that type of situation now, whereas before we couldn't because we didn't know the animal was coming in. And
Hmm.
so allowing things like that to happen has really benefited us, the pets, and our community.
That's great. Anna, thank you so much for sharing your story and how that's working for you all, and congrats on all the success for it, because I know that you all have gone through a lot over the last 18 months in
Yes,
Fort Worth. So congrats on all of it.
thank
Um,
you.
So next up is Rachel Ide. Rachel oversees field services for Young Williams Animal Center in Knoxville, Tennessee. Rachel, like I know that animal services is somewhat new for Young Williams, and um, you've kind of built out that program from scratch. And tell us a little bit about how managed intake plays a role in the work that you're doing from a field services perspective.
Absolutely. And thanks everyone for joining us today. It would be remiss if I didn't talk about some of Young Williams' shelter life-saving programs because they really add into what we do in the field. So I'm just going to very briefly talk about those. Why don't you know we have lower intake hours than open hours. We have a dedicated pet detective. We have a friendly finder program. I do want to throw some stats out for there because we just started that in June 2024. We had a horrible distemper breakout. January to June 2024, we had 109 people who did Friendly Finder. At that time, it didn't have a name. We didn't advertise it. We didn't help people with supplies. It was just those general public who enjoyed animals and would happily hold on to an animal. After June 2024, we realized we needed to really push this program and see how animal services can help that program. And I'll talk a little bit about that. But now, January 2025 to June 2025, we've done 300 Friendly Finder programs, right? So does that sound like a lot? Maybe it doesn't, but that is a lot of animals. It's 300 animals that didn't make it into the shelter right away. 38 were reunited with their family members, 27 were placed by the own finders, and 95 kept them. So only 140 of those animals ended up at the shelter. So our Friendly Finder program, if you feel like your program is already doing it and the community is already doing it, it's true. But if you support them a little bit more, you'll see that number double. So we've been really excited about that. We also have the retention programs like the Pet Food Pantry, a pet resource center that manages our owner surrenders, and of course, an access to care low-cost clinic and spay neuter clinic. So the shelter is already doing a lot of amazing things. It kind of makes you wonder, how does animal services even bother to help? A lot of the ways that we help is basics. And I'm going to say this is basics, but before April 2024, there was not a single microchip scanner inside of a single animal control truck. Hello, meet my cat. Now every truck has a microchip scanner. Every officer knows how to use it. We bring home an average of 30 pets per month. Again, maybe that doesn't sound like a lot, but in a year, that's 400 pets that didn't have to enter the shelter, right? So that's your very, very basic. And that might be through microchips. It might be because every officer has to knock on at least 6 doors. Wherever you found it, go knock at least 6 doors around them. We also utilize our Petco Love Lost. It's a great website. And back to that shelter, because we have a pet detective, we ask her before we even bring that shelter in. We say, hey, have you seen any posts about it? Has anyone called in? She's in on all the rings and the Facebooks and all those things, right? So talking to her before we even get to the shelter makes a massive difference. I am still looking for a really good catchphrase, everyone, but I bring in 150 strays, but less than 30 will ever have any type of ID trace. So if it has an ID trace, animal services officers will bring it home. And that's really important to us to make sure that we're able to do that. But not only are we bringing it home, so this is where we kind of step up a little bit, right? We have fence fixing materials. We have enrichment items. We can connect those individuals to our spay neuter program. We can connect those individuals to our behavior program. Why is your animal getting loose? Is it a behavior issue? Is it not fixed? Those are things that we're able to connect them straight to the resources of the shelter as an animal services officer, right in the field, right having that conversation, and it's made a massive difference in itself. So breaking down those barriers is really important. And that goes back to the Friendly Finder. When we first started, our shelter said, we don't want to make you a pet taxi. We don't want to make you a pet taxi. I'll be a pet taxi. I'll be a pet taxi all day long. I will bring dogs back home. I will bring people who want to be a friendly finder, food and supplies and crates, because I want to encourage them to do these things. If I have a general public brought in a stray animal and my pet detective says, hey, I've called the person on the chip and they're just not answering, can you swing by their address? Absolutely, I'll go knock on their door. Oh, you just don't have transport to get your dog back? We'll bring them back for you. making sure that we are being part of the solution and not part of a barrier is really important to us. So making sure we're aligning with the goals of the shelter, the abilities and resources that they have, those are really important. Start branching out more. We've taught all of our fire departments how to use a microchip scanner. I think we've had one person bring an animal to a fire department, but it was really good PR, right? It was really good PR. So those are different things. And if nothing else, is a great education opportunity to talk about microchipping and talk about those things. So as we're stepping up and we're really aligning ourselves with our shelter, let me remove this. Sorry about that. As we start really aligning with our shelter, we started doing heat maps. We heat mapped where all of our strays were. So guess where our spay neuter shuttle is going? It's going to where those heat maps are. Any places that we're picking up animals that are not microchipped, that's where our vaccination clinics are going. So now we're aligning not only what we're seeing, but bringing in the resources from the shelter to those areas. So that way we're just really staying together as a shelter, and that we also simply aligned. No more calling animal control and saying, hey, I want to get rid of this dog, because at the door you were said, hey, here's your pet resource center. Here's the things. Absolutely not. Animal services, we are Young Williams. We also will ask you to make sure that you make that appointment, because we know it's normally a resource issue. And if you say, well, I just can't make an appointment because I only had a car that day, that's okay. We'll deliver your dog if you still need that surrender a month from now. So there's definitely ways that you can make what you're doing in the field align with the shelter, and not only its programs, but also its resources and its different goals.
Love that. And it is a never a best friends webinar without a cat walking across the computer screen. So no harm on that. One of the things that when we talked a couple weeks ago that really jumped out at me was, because you are going back and doing the door knocking and reconnecting with those owners out in the field and able to return a lot of those pets and having those conversations, you told me that you kind of are tracking the recidivism and how often you have to go back to the same households before you can fix a problem. And tell us a little bit more about that piece of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we are not only bringing those animals home, right? We're able to have that conversation, again, attaching why is your animal getting loose to some resources, whether that's behavioral, whether that's a spay neuter program, whether it's just me fixing a fence, providing some enrichment items. So our habitual strays, which any animal services officer will tell you is probably one of your top calls, are solved within 3 calls or less at this juncture. It took about 6 months to get there, but we only have 8% of our calls that have more than 3 calls. Otherwise, we will solve the issue within 3 calls. And that's just us being open as animal control officers, being open to say, hey, how can we help you keep your pet at home? Because we know as soon as it enters the shelter, that's where the problems start. Whether your animal starts getting sick, whether you feel you can't go and get the animal due to transportation issues, whatever it might be. If we can keep that home, that is always our goal.
And so you basically said that when you're able to do all of that, it's like 3 trips is what solves the recidivism. And I think about that all the time with, like, when animals perpetually get loose and they end up at the shelter, if we don't stop the recidivism, then they go out and get another pet and the cycle continues. And so you're able to basically get on top of this problem by having those communications. And I think that's really, really amazing. The other thing that we talked about a lot that I thought was super interesting is the role that dispatch plays in this process. So tell me a little bit about the role that dispatch plays for you all at Young Williams.
Absolutely. So we have an in-house dispatch. I do realize not everyone has that capability to say, let's do in-house dispatch. But if you can, I encourage you to weigh the pros and cons of that, especially if you are directing field officers. We get an average about 2,000 calls per month, but I only send an officer out for about 900 calls per month. That is how much mitigation we do over the phone. And I can promise you, talking about friendly finder and those statistics about, hey, can you hold this animal for just this much longer, is much easier to do when they're at their house than it is when they're at the shelter. Going straight back to what Anna was saying, no one wants to, once they're already at the shelter and they've already waited this time, already made this inconvenient, say, well, are you willing to hold it if we can do this, this? Yeah, sometimes they are, but normally they're like, no, I'm done. I'm tired of that. Having in-house dispatch means every stray call that we get to have that conversation right away. We get to say, hey, can you do this? And this is why we would love for you to do it. It's an education opportunity. We say we will bring you supplies. Don't worry, you will still be supported throughout this entire process. ASO friendly finders, so people who have agreed to do it just by hearing through our dispatch, is about 30 a month. That's just someone who's called us. They didn't even have to walk through a door. No animal stepped foot anywhere. That's about 30. So that's, again, maybe doesn't sound like much, right? But I've got 30 in field I haven't brought to the shelter because I've returned to owner. I have 30 I've taken over the phone and not even talked to. That's 60 animals not coming to a shelter every single month because we're able to mitigate those and help educate people through that community process. And it makes a massive, massive difference. I really think that a lot of our education and our community relationships have super improved with having dispatch and having someone on the other side being able to walk you through those concerns that you have.
Yes, we talked a lot about that during our call. Just like sometimes it's just winning at the margins a little bit. Like if you can keep 5% from coming in by this way and 10% from coming in that way, and then get a few more of like rehomed, like it all adds up over time. And I think that's really cool. So Rachel, thank you so much. The other thing I want to add is that even if you don't have a dispatch officially, shelters can do this on their own if they answer the phone and use their own phones. I think so often we just let them go to voicemail and may or may not ever get back to people and miss these opportunities to have these critical conversations. So Rachel, thank you so much for sharing your experience and what you all are doing at Young Williams. I know it's a new program and you're collecting data on it. And so looking forward to even hearing more in the future from you. So with that, I'm jumping over to Misty Valenta. Misty, every time I talk, so Misty is a Williamson County regional animal shelter in Williamson County, Texas. Misty, every time I talk to you, I'm always struck by the community approach that you have to everything that you do. I want you to talk a little bit philosophically about that, and then we're going to get into your Friendly Finder program because we had a question specifically about Friendly Finder programs. I think those are kind of newer ideas for some folks, and they may be less familiar with how they work. So I want you to talk a little bit about that too.
For sure. Thank you for having me. And I love sitting here with all of these amazing folks, hearing all these great ideas. And what we're doing philosophically is very similar to what all of these other panelists are doing at their shelters. We don't have a lot of resources as an industry. We all have community. That is an untapped resource for all of us. And we realized that with adoptions. We highlighted customer service. We focused so hard on customer service to get our dogs and cats adopted. And it hit me one day, why don't we have that same level of customer service for the other side of the shelter, for the folks coming in asking for help with their own pet or with a pet that they found? And it just struck me again, another untapped resource for us to connect to. So now our philosophy is when folks are walking into our services lobby, which is formerly known as our intake lobby, instead of looking at that person walking in with a dog and thinking, oh my gosh, where am I going to put that dog? We have no kennels. Instead of doing that, we need to be looking at that person and saying, how am I going to get this person on our team? How are we going to work together to get the best outcome for that pet that they are walking in with? And that's the turning point. As soon as you're looking at someone walking in as an intake number, you've lost. As soon as you look at them as a teammate, you've won. You've won for the pets at the shelter. You've won for that pet that needs help right in front of you. It's just a way to help the community kind of help themselves with our services and our expertise.
I love it. I think one of the things that I just remember you talking about that you never wanted to implement a program that didn't make your community better. and doing that. And so I always think that that's such a wonderful approach to all this. So let's talk about your Friendly Finder program. I know that this is a newer program for you. I think we have a visual for that that you can kind of share to kind of kick off like what your point of view is on that. So tell us a little bit about your Friendly Finder program, how that works, and how you're utilizing that for the community.
Yes, and this is one of the three choices that you have. If you're coming to us with a found pet, we're going to give you three choices on how you're going to help. And you get to pick. So you have agency of how connected you're going to be. You can be a finder to family, which is when we scan that pet, if they have a microchip or tag or information, and we can find their family right away, will you just Uber them back to home? And we'll, most people will do that. Let's say you can't foster that pet for whatever reason. We're going to give you flyers so that you can go back out to that area, flyer that area that you found a pet, so that family can find them back at our shelter. And third is finder to foster. So we are going to give you an elevated service if you agree to foster the pet that you found for the stray hold period. When you walk into our services area, got this long sidewalk, you're going to see an A-frame with this poster on it that says, if you lost your pet, where would you want them to wait for you? So that's what you're walking by as you're walking in. Then as soon as you get in, there's another A-frame with that poster. We're introducing the idea of fostering without even using the word foster. We're just playing to what we all want. What's best for this pet in front of us? And so if you walk in and as we're talking to you, as we're scanning for that microchip, if you express interest in fostering, you skip the line. You get priority service because you're doing something amazing for the community and for the pet. We will get you started with our foster questionnaire. So you sit down and you fill out, obviously, our form to inform us where you found the pet, all of that information, and the foster questionnaire. Meanwhile, we're whisking that dog or those kittens in the back and giving them our initial workup, getting them the vaccines that they need, microchip, all of that kind of great stuff, and getting them into our database. By the time that foster is done with the questionnaire and everything, we have the kittens or the dog coming back, and we get supplies together, and then you leave. You leave same day. There is no, okay, we're taking your foster questionnaire and we're going to evaluate it, and 5 days later, we're going to give you a call. No, you're leaving same day, supplies in hand, and with a return date. And that return date is predetermined. We'll talk to you about it. And so you don't feel like we're just dumping the responsibility onto you. We are acting as teammates, working together with the ultimate goal of reunion. So I don't know if you can hear my office dog snoring. Apparently he's very bored by this conversation.
Oh, as they can tend to be. So yeah, I just think that's so amazing, like how you kind of tee that up with people who have found lost pets that are able to come in and giving them the options of how they can help and support. When people come in, like what is the usage rate of this program when people find a lost pet, they're bringing them to the shelter, and then you're asking for their help and support or maybe keeping the pet for a couple of days? Approximately how many people are choosing to do that?
It's been growing steadily. And I'll say we started pretty low. I think the first year we implemented it, it was only 77 people who said yes. And every year it's going up and up. I think we're almost at 200 for this year. And it might not happen at that moment. So we do have those folks who fill out the lost form and leave the dog, especially the dog, leave the dog with us. What we're trying to do is offer the transparency of what sheltering means. Our lobby is relatively quiet compared to some of the back of house areas. You know, it's not going to smell the same. And so when people are dropping off a pet, they're seeing what's around them and they're expecting that in the back. If someone is dropping off a pet for us to do all the reunion work, we ask them to come and help us set up the kennel in our intake area so that they can experience what it is like in the shelter. So they walk back with us, they grab that bedding, we're putting in the water in there, and then they see that intake room and what it looks like and where that dog is going. And many times we will get a visit the next day or a phone call or an email asking, can I come back and foster that dog? Because they had a moment to just see what the truth was and to sit with that truth and realize that that wasn't the choice they actually wanted to make. And of course, we support them with fostering.
And I think it's doing it in a kind way too. It's not hammering them over the head with it. You're making them a part of the process, but when they like see the reality of it, and you know, it's no matter how good your animal shelter is, it's still not the same as that couch that it could be on at home. But even if it's not a couch at home, even if they're staying, keeping them primarily in a pop-up crate in their garage or something during decent weather, like that's still a less chaotic environment than your animal shelter is. So, thank you for that.
Yeah, you can't, unless you show it, you can't with words
Right.
explain it. They have to experience it.
They have to hear it for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
For
They have
sure.
to hear it, they have to smell it, they gotta
Yeah.
get all the senses into it. Yeah.
The last thing I want to ask from you on this is you have a really cool, like Nick talked a lot about like his rehoming program and the success of his peer-to-peer rehoming program. I want to talk about you to talk a little bit about your structure for rehoming and rehoming fees, just so people get a little exposure to that.
Yes, we have a rehoming program that super proud of and has had some amazing results. We serve everyone in our county, so I call us open intake because we don't discriminate versus, you know, breed or demeanor. And we are also managed intake, so we're going to help you with the rehoming process. We sat down one day and I asked folks, what do you wish folks would do before leaving their pet at the shelter? And it's all the things that we always talk about, right? Like posting on social media and calling a friend and seeing if they will help, reaching out for training advice, all of those kind of basic things that we've been wishing people would do. We probably posted it on our website, but we never did anything to really motivate people to actually do those things. In fact, we kept saying how we're the experts and we're supposed to be doing all those things. So we flipped it. We started using some positive reinforcement to get folks invested, involved, kind of gamify it a little bit. So we have a pretty high rehoming fee. Our board voted on a $100 rehoming fee per pet. However, they gave me the ability as director to discount that as needed. So I took that upon myself to create discounts for all of those items that we wish folks would do anyways. So if you show us that you posted on social media to help rehome your pet, 20 bucks off. If you posted on rehome.com, buy adopt a pet, 20 bucks off. So all of the things that we want people to do, we've just never motivated them to do them. I'm going to give you a discount so you can get it down to a $25 rehome fee. And honestly, most of the time with all of those combined with excellent customer service of just listening to these folks, treating them like humans, being compassionate, most don't show up for their rehome appointments.
I just love it so much. I love the positive and reinforcement aspect of it, and like making them feel like they're a partner in all of this. So, Misty, thank you so much for sharing your experience with it. I want to thank, first of all, Rachel, Anastasia, Misty, Nick. Thank you all for sharing your wisdom and experience on this. I think that this is an area where we're going to continue to grow and learn from each other and learn from the programs. And so I'm so excited about all of that. Thank you all for that. Everyone on the call, just note that we are having round two of this next week. And so Nick and Missy are going to dive in more deeply into their individual programs so that you feel like you're better equipped for implementing a managed intake program in your community so that they can kind of get into the deep dive pieces of it. We do have time for a couple of questions, and there's one in here. And so I will let whoever wants to take this, take this. But somebody posted in here that we're currently struggling to keep the doors open at our shelter, and we're seeing an increase in dump and runs that we feel like have doubled, if not tripled. Anybody have any words of advice for this person?
I just have questions on what's the community relationship like between your shelter and your community? And is it a place that folks feel like they can come to talk about what's going on in their life? Or does there need to be some work on reestablishing that friendship so that way folks do feel comfortable letting you know what's going on?
Yeah, and do they feel supported in that? Because I think that that's a really important piece of it. If they just feel like they won't be supported or they will be judged in that, I think that can be super challenging. Anybody else have an answer for that one?
Yeah, I would. Oh, go ahead, Rachel.
Oop.
No, go ahead.
I think we all have things we'd love to say. And I will say that it happens to us too. We get dump and runs. We get kittens left in boxes outside of our shelter door. And it happened more after distemper, which, we went on the news and we said, this is why we can't take animals. And it still happened. We have all these programs and resources, and it still happens. It's probably still always going to happen. But what you need to be looking at is from a really wholesome 360 point of view. Those animals that are in your shelter right now, how can we get them out? The ones that are coming in, what can we do? What relationships can we establish with our community? As Misty said, I think it's really about looking at each piece. And when you get overwhelmed like that, you try to look for one solution to fix everything because you're so overwhelmed. And I hate to tell you, but it's normally 10 steps to make it work because it's a piece here and a piece there and a piece here. But I think that's a big part of it is like, who's already at your shelter? How can you best support those ones? Who can you meet in your community to best have that conversation with? And also understand that it is still going to happen. And it's, part of the resiliency of animal welfare that we are still able to step up every single day and care for those animals. And if we continue with that message and that openness, I think that that's when we start making real change. And sometimes it's in small ticks, but real change does happen.
I want to echo what Rachel and Misty said here, and I want to challenge you during those situations. It's a learning opportunity for the shelter and the staff because we have that happen too. There's always going to be a drop off, but anytime that happens, and this happened to us a couple weeks ago, and my staff came to me and I challenged them and I said, what's a good reason that somebody dropped the animal off and ran out? And they're like, well, there can't be any good reason. And I said to them, well, what if they got a call on the phone and their daughter was pregnant and they had to rush to the hospital? Maybe that's why they did it. Think outside, like challenge your staff to think about that humane education, put themselves in that person's role, because echoing what Misty just said, that's going to help your staff and your organization to bring back that community relationship by putting yourself in their shoes just for that moment. And I think that's the best way how we can start to combat those situations where it's like, oh, geez, now we just have a dump and run. Change the narrative, try to change it into a positive, has really helped our organization when we have those difficult moments.
I think that's so important with the just the relationship that you have with your community that way, so it feels less adversarial and more of a partnership for it. Again, I want to remind everybody to join us again next week. We'll have even more from Misty and Nick. One final question. We've got maybe 3 or 4 minutes. If we run over a couple minutes, we might do that too. But somebody said that they, in their area, that their shelter has closed their doors. And that's leaving a lot of their not-for-profits in crisis. And it's one of the things I'm hoping that we can do through this dialogue through Managed Intake is how we can make it less of a closed door situation and more of a managed situation. Anybody have any thoughts on this one, or like even Anna, I think particularly for you on this, on how maybe not-for-profits and the shelters can work together in helping solve this?
Sorry, I had to find my unmute. Yeah, so and I'm not sure which part of the spectrum this person falls in, if they are in the not-for-profit side as a volunteer at the shelter or what. But I would encourage them to reach out to the other side and see how they can work together. What can they do to help the community together, right? Together we can all do better. So reach out and start that conversation of, hey, I know that you guys are closed for intake because of X, Y, and Z. How can we help you to reopen intake to better help the community we both care about, that we're both invested in, that we're both serving? And maybe approach it from that softer side. We often see people approaching it in they don't care, they're just, they're shirking their responsibilities, right? Which is why we were so cognizant of that when we started our intake program, that we're not shirking our responsibility. We're just trying to make sure that we are being the most effective at our jobs and providing for the pets that do need to come in and finding solutions for ones that don't. So I would highly encourage you to reach out from, like Nick said, from a place of understanding, right? It goes both ways.
Thank you so much for that. Any closing thoughts from any of our panelists as we get ready to send people on their way?
I would just challenge them to talk with your team members, talk with your staff, ask them what they think about their community and see what kind of words that they use. And that's a good baseline of where you need to go as an organization, whether it's to elevate the good work that you're already doing, or is it time to transform a few minds and save some more lives that way?
Well, everyone, thank you so much for attending. I appreciate it so much.